The more I have embraced inclusion as a practice, the less attached I am to positioning my offers as money-making offers because that's what sells.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Welcome to Represented, the podcast. I'm Aniki Shuru, racial equity coach for online business owners who want to be intentionally inclusive by building a business that is racially equitable. I created this podcast to normalize a conversation around racial inclusion so that fear is no longer the barrier that gets in the way of doing this work. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're taking your first steps or you're well-versed in the journey towards racial equity, this space is for you. So welcome home, friend. Let's get started.
From coast to coast, around the globe, we are represented.
Just finished recording the episode with Dallas Travers, and she is a gem of a human being. Honestly, this episode is something that I would love you to come back again and listen and take notes because I believe this is really, really going to serve you, especially if you're a white online business owner, when it comes to how can you have a business that is going to serve you for years and years and years to come, by being intentionally inclusive, like how those two go hand in hand, especially if you're somebody who was perhaps really, really active back in 2020 and this work of inclusion has kind of slipped away, or you're just somebody who this work is important to you and you want to hear how somebody else is being intentionally inclusive in their life and in their business. What are the things that they're doing to stay plugged in, especially right now, when there is cutbacks, rollbacks, especially in the United States, and DEI just feels like it's a bad word. You're going to love Dallas so much. In fact, when I finished pressing record after we had had our conversation, the first thing she said is, "Can we be friends?" And we just burst out laughing. She's a gem of a human being. First time having a conversation with her virtually, and I think she's somebody that you need to know and follow. Here's a little bit about Dallas. Dallas Travers helps values driven coaches build sustainable businesses without hype or hustle. Through her client-centered sales system, she teaches coaches how to sign clients consistently, simplify their marketing, and show up with confidence. Her approach blends real strategy, deep integrity, and just the right amount of tough love. Dallas's clients have had a lot of firsts. First paying client, yay! First five-figure launch, first five-figure day, first six-figure year, all with confidence plus clarity because they finally have a plan that feels good and the tools to implement. Without further ado, here is my friend, Dallas Travers. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Represented Podcast. So delighted to have Dallas Travers with me. As you've had in the intro, she's a phenomenal woman, and I just want to dive straight into it. Dallas, thank you so much for saying yes and being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Now, tell me, I want us to talk about impact and inclusion because there is a specific page on your website where you lay out, what impact and inclusion means to you. I want to start by asking, is it something you've always advocated for, especially when it comes to people who are on the margins, specifically Black, Indigenous, and people of color? Or was it something that being a coach made you aware of the inequities that exist?
Yeah, I wish I could say this has always been a visible practice for me. I think inclusion has always mattered a lot to me, but as a white woman in America, I didn't really. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but let's just get right to it, right? I didn't think it was any of my business. And which is like privilege 101, right? The thing I still feel friction around in my inclusion work is I never want to be performative, right? I never want to make it about me. And that motivator actually got I got it twisted, Annie, and I thought, oh, I don't want to be performative. This is none of my business. But as I've grown older, and I think motherhood also played a big role in this, but also just looking at the kinds of coaches I was attracting, I realized it's my job to be visible and vocal about my values and the things that matter, in particular when it comes to serving marginalized communities and raising up the voices of people who serve marginalized communities.
Mm, Thank you so much for being so candid about it, and especially that bit where you felt like it wasn't any of your business, to talk about these things or to be involved in it. And isn't it part of the system that we are all sort of part of when it comes to matters to do with race? We are made to feel a certain way that these are things where, they're best left untouched, or perhaps it's not my place. And I think for different people, they feel different things, especially like I can speak for myself as a Black woman. You never want to bring up the race card because it's such a dangerous
Mhm.
and potentially harmful card that could harm me as a
You.
Black person if I
Mhm.
bring it up. And so it is something that you have to walk that line with such care that you'd rather not bring it up for the sake of not bringing that harm on yourself. And but also on the other side of whiteness now, there's that thing of don't get involved, don't talk about it, don't get involved really. And isn't that the lie that we've been taught to accept and to keep things such as racism thriving?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's another layer to it. Speaking as a white woman, yes, that like don't get involved. And then another layer is because if you do, you may cause more harm,
That's it.
right? I think that was a big thing I was worried about was perpetuating
Yeah.
things that I didn't know about. And then I realized, okay, why don't you get to know about these things so you can actually stand up for what matters to you?
Oh, yes. And was there an aha moment? Was there a moment when you felt like, actually, I think I've believed things that haven't been true. I need
Mm.
to get better at this. Was there a moment in time? Was there an aha? Was there a time when you felt like I have to do something, especially as somebody who's a coach, you're holding space for people.
Yeah.
And it's so important when you have that gift and that privilege to bring people into your space and support them, that you're doing so in a way that allows them to feel held and seen. And it's very difficult to do that if you haven't done this work of inclusion.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the summer of 2020 when George Floyd was murdered here in the US, there was a long overdue awakening. Sadly, I think that there's been a new constriction around that. But back then, I felt so deeply a couple of things that I didn't have like my privilege was not something that could it wasn't enough, right? I needed
Mm,
to do something. I really felt that call. And I also knew I wanted to do it in a way that was sustainable and lasting rather than trendy. So
yeah.
that was really happening. So I invested a lot in an inclusion coach and learning as much as I could and just getting over myself,
Hmm.
knowing that I was going to get it wrong. And the thing that would matter would be how I responded to that. So that was a big one. And then I can remember so clearly Trudy LeBron, who her podcast is no longer live, but she
Mm,
did an episode about what it means to be performative.
mm,
Because at that time, we were also seeing a lot of people saying all the right things, but their actions weren't necessarily backing them up. And I
that's
was
so
really
true.
nervous. I
Yes.
was
Yeah.
nervous about being that person. But Trudy was the person who really, the light bulb for me. I remember I was folding laundry and I can even remember it was a load of whites. Like that's how vivid it is in my mind. I
Yes.
was folding the laundry, like folding my husband's undies or something. And she said, if you are performative, you're taking action based on how other people will perceive you and your actions. So if you're not taking action, that's all because you don't want to be performative, that's also performative,
Mhm.
right? Not taking action for fear of doing it wrong or what people may think, that is another version of being performative. And that really clicked for me.
I'm so glad that we often land on something that gives us that light bulb moment and you're like, oh my goodness, this is what performative means. This is, you know, just something that clicks for you and is relatable
Mm,
to you. One of the things that I often tell my students, Dallas, is if you're asking the question, am I performative? Or you're afraid of being performative, chances are you probably are. Because when you look at it from the dynamics of a friendship, a relationship,
right.
at what point in your, relationship do you ever tell your husband, um, I don't know, I think I've been a performative wife, or your best friend, do you ever go like, I don't think I'm being, am I being genuine? Do you think I'm being a real friend? You just know that you
Yes.
are because you're showing up genuinely.
Hmm.
You may not be perfect. You will make mistakes in your relationships. But the thing is, you're coming in with a clean heart. You're coming in genuinely. You're loving. You're taking action. And so that's why I liken it to if you have to ask the question, am I being performative or I'm afraid to be? Chances are you probably are. And
Right.
you need to start.
Yes, I've never heard that analogy, that metaphor before. I'm just looking at it through the lens of any other relationship that you're
Mhm.
in, and that's so crystallizing for me. I'm so glad you shared that. Thank you.
You're so welcome. One of the things that really caught my attention, Dallas, was when I was going through your website and impact and inclusion. Of course, I jumped straight there. I didn't even go through the about or, home page. I just, raced through to that page. And I have to say, I was so incredibly uh, surprised in a good way. I
Mm,
spend a lot of time supporting, clients put together their DEI statements, their inclusion journey statements, like how did you get here? And they are one of the things that we do that gives them so much fulfillment. Like they feel they stand out in a different way. They're vocalizing something they've never been able to vocalize before, and they've done the work. So this is not something that they're doing like I'm new here, and so help me put this together. These are people who've been doing the work, and they're able to articulate the work that they've been doing. When I came across yours, it was so detailed. And the way
mm,
you've got like, the different steps of what you've done with your business from like step one to like step 15, I was like, you are deeply invested in this. There's nothing that felt surface level. Investing in a DEI coach for like 3 years, getting your team to do this work for like 2 years, you are in it. And I picked that up so quickly and so
Mm.
easily. What was that process like for you about creating that journey statement? Because you really do take us on a journey, and being able to articulate yourself in that way.
Yeah, it was so helpful for me actually to be able to put on the page the actions that we were taking, but also because I hold this value so close, there were a lot of things we were doing that I didn't even think, that I didn't really think about,
Mm.
right? For example, the woman that we hire when we do our hiring, she is a Black woman. And I wasn't like, oh, let me go find a Black lady to hire or this, but it's just so ingrained in our practices. So it was cool to be able to make that list and realize, okay, we are
Mhm.
living this. We're
Mhm.
not checking boxes here.
Yeah.
And I think it was also my audience tends to be newer business owners.
Yes.
So I felt like it was important to illustrate to them, and I can tend to be a perfectionist, right? So I wanted to illustrate for myself, but also for my audience, that inclusion happens in small steps way more than it happens in big initiatives.
Mm.
So that timeline just really helped me see for myself, but hopefully communicate
Yeah.
that that is what the practice of getting better at this really looks like.
Mm. And I think it is such a service to people who are looking, especially those newer business owners. One of the things I often get asked is, tell me what to do. What does it look like? What does being
Mm,
inclusive look like? Give me an example. Who's doing it right so that I can follow them and see what they're doing? This work it's so, we're so detached from it, or rather, it's so foreign, the idea of being inclusive, that you almost need to see somebody modeling it for you to begin to understand. And that is such a powerful move for you as a coach, because there are many who say they're inclusive, they're doing
mhm,
all sorts of things, but you can't quite see it. You know, they know they're a good person. I'm not a racist. I'm inclusive. I have friends who, are Black or Indigenous or people of color. Like, I'm one of the good ones, Annie. But it's the modeling for me that is so
mhm,
key, that I come back to. I'm like, you know, you hold a position of influence. You hold a position of leadership within your business. And even though your business is not that big, or you're new to it, you are part of a very powerful table. And that table is your dinner table. And the
mhm,
people around that table, you're having conversations. And what you say stays. What you say is open for discussion. And it will frame somebody's beliefs, especially our children, the next generation. So we
mhm.
all have a role to play. How are we modeling that? How are we having those conversations that we then pass on? And I think that's where a lot of people miss the real idea of how being intentionally inclusive is. It starts
Mhm.
at home. It's that personal inner work before it can even translate to your business. Because if you're only doing it in your business, then that is really just performative. It's just for us to see, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm thinking about the harm, Dallas, that does when you just pop it in your business. And I come and I get so excited, I read all these things. But then if we end up working together, there's a disconnect, because the person is not the things that they've said they are. This is just who I'm saying I am. But in reality, I'm not yet there. I haven't done the work, so I don't even have the capacity to hold you, to support you in the way that you think I can, because I haven't done the work.
And if I could offer,
Sure.
I don't even know that I don't have the capacity to hold you. It's like that, it's that piece, right? I mean, I cringe often when I see other coaches talking about the safe space that their program
Mhm,
is, because
mhm.
safety is not even something that we can
Guarantee.
guarantee, right? We can strive for it and we can be
Absolutely.
accountable, and I just get nervous because that's like ticking the boxes, right?
Yes.
Yes, our safe, our place. Yes, of
Mhm.
course, I have a safe space. I'm a nice person. That is not, it's not the same thing at all.
Absolutely.
So,
And safety is such a, there's
mm,
so much nuance to it because what's safe for somebody else may not be
yeah,
safe for me. You know, what does safety mean? Safety means different things, you know, for different people. When you look at a baby and what's safe for them is so different for what's safe for a toddler or you know, a kid who's going to school. It's all so different. Safety is relative and it's relative to your
yeah,
environment. And those are things that we really, really don't understand. In fact, one of my latest podcast episodes, I'm talking about, you know, the skill that is still the most important for us as coaches is how to hold safer space.
mm,
You know, not talking about the safest space, but how can you hold safer space? And that can only come about when you understand how to hold that space, when you understand some of the things that the people you might be holding space for have undergone. And if you don't have that understanding, it becomes so difficult to hold space and even to support them to reach whatever goals they may have as a coach. And I think, yeah, providing that safer space is one of the most important skills we need as coaches.
yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. And I also think another important skill as a coach is repair,
Mm.
understanding how to recover or how to respond when safety has been violated by
Oh,
whomever, right? And I think what I have noticed, because that's like my biggest fear, is making a mistake in public, right?
yes.
And so it's happened a handful of times over the years where I have had to apologize, right? And take the proper steps in order to acknowledge harm that was done,
Mm.
identify the game plan moving forward, have the right conversations with the right individuals. A lot of those were conversations with myself.
Yes.
And what I have learned from that is my clients appreciate that so much more, Annie, than me just getting it right. This kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about modeling.
Yes. Yeah.
So, as a Capricorn and an Enneagram 3, this is my journey is being imperfect and owning it and realizing that the magic really happens in the repair.
Gosh, it so does. It really, really does. And in a recent newsletter that I sent to my um, subscribers on my mailing list
Hmm.
was, you know, the first step is making mistakes. The
Yeah.
first step is making mistakes. It's not bypassing it. It's not like being the good one. When you begin to do this work, it starts by making mistakes. And it's like if you try and liken it to any other thing, like learning how to uh, ride a bike, learning how to cook, learning how to speak a different language, if you're not making mistakes, if you're not falling down and getting back up, how are you learning? And
Hmm.
sometimes it is
Absolutely.
through the mistakes that you actually have that deeper learning. It's
Hmm.
not just watching what people have modeled for you. You really do need to get on the driver's seat and not be a passenger anymore and drive that car. You know,
Mm.
modeled for you. You've seen how people drive, but now it's time for you to get behind the wheel and make mistakes and people
Yeah.
honk at you and you're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't do that. I should really, really be careful when I'm changing lanes, or this is how you park, or this is, you have
Yes.
to do it yourself and make mistakes to learn. And that's
Yeah.
the hardest thing to do for all of us, I have to say. The making mistakes is so hard because we haven't normalized making mistakes. And I truly believe when it comes to this work of anti-racism, there has been this very abrasive approach, this very aggressive approach that if you get it wrong, especially as a white person, oh my gosh, the call out is
Yeah.
so extreme that you feel like, I just want to be quiet about this. I just don't want to rock the boat. I would like to make a difference, but I know if I make a mistake, I might be used as the poster child for
Yep.
the example of what mistakes look like.
Yeah. I can remember a few years ago, um, a very well-known person in our space made a mistake and was called out for it and essentially canceled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people in my world, a lot of peers, this became a conversation, right? The risk of being canceled when you're doing it wrong. And I remember this was a group meeting with my DEI coach at the time, and someone asked, I can't even remember the question, but I do remember the answer. But the question was basically like, how do we even handle this? This person did not handle it right. We see that. But where are the examples of people handling it right? And my coach said, you don't see those examples because people are handling it right. Right? So it doesn't get magnified and
Yes. Yeah.
posted and reposted. And so
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the biggest lesson I have learned in my own personal journey as it relates to inclusion is the importance of repair and being like
Mm.
brave enough to repair so that we can model for others.
Absolutely. And I think that idea of repair can only come about when you're part of spaces where you're
Mm,
learning. This is not something that comes out of isolation. So if you're somebody who's just read a book, who has watched a documentary, and you're like, "Oh, now I know," or like it comes from being part of community, investing your
yeah.
time, your money, making that real big decision of I am going to put myself in this spaces. I'm going to surround myself with these people so that I can actually know the art of repair and I can be in it. I think that's where, you know, people may be getting it wrong. A lot of coaches may be getting it wrong because they're thinking this is a self-study thing that I can do. And then
Mm,
I can know because there's always that tell me what to do, tell me what to do. What can I read? What checkbox or what
yeah.
tools, what checklist do I need so that I know so that I'm safe? But it's gosh, inclusion is lifelong. It's not something you take. It's not something that
Mm,
and it's not linear as well. You know, you
yeah.
don't just keep growing and growing. You grow, but sometimes you'll take steps back. Through growth, it's still growth, but it's just
Yeah.
not linear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
One of the things I've been thinking about is, are you able to, and before we get to sharing some of the things that you've done, like the examples of how you've tried to be intentionally inclusive, I support many white online business owners. And a lot of times they come into this work, either they've taken one of my courses, they've read a book, and they're consuming different types of content. But the struggle that comes up for them is how do I implement this? I now
Mm,
know, and I can see the gaps that I have within me as a human and as a coach. But the struggle is how do I implement this? And I'd love to know how you've been able to sustainably run your business whilst still centering or being intentionally inclusive.
yeah. Yeah. So I think for us, well, I'll give I'm going to use one of my initiatives as an example here to answer your question. So inside the Hive, which is a year-long coaching program, we have a social impact exchange program. So essentially, coaches who serve historically marginalized communities can become fellows inside of our program. And what that looks like is they have their tuition waived in the program in exchange for full participation and feedback along the way about how what I'm teaching actually applies or doesn't apply to their community.
Mm.
So I wanted initially, I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll have a scholarship
Mhm.
program, or that's kind of the first place a lot of
Yes.
People go, let me have a scholarship program, but that has a whole bunch of assumptions built in. One could argue that that's inherently racist if you think you just give black and brown people a discount and you're good. Like it's
Yeah.
problematic, right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I knew I wanted, that's where it started. Like, oh, is it a scholarship program? And then it was the word impact. So I had to really just think about
Mm.
what is the goal here? Like in being inclusive, what is the outcome I am striving for in my little corner of the world?
Yes.
And the goal was impact. So how can I, with my lived experience and my limited knowledge, really have an impact, the most possible impact on historically marginalized communities? Oh, I could teach what I know to people who are already a part of those communities, already built to serve those communities and
Yes.
help them have a deeper impact. So it was this ripple effect. And that was where the fellowship came from, right? This, okay, it's a scholarship, but it can't just be a scholarship because that just felt like I was ticking a box.
Yeah.
So I just started to kind of dig into that. But I will tell you, this is part of what this relates to what you shared earlier about the growth not being linear. A few
Mhm.
months ago, we really looked through the lens of impact, right? How much impact are we having with our fellows? And 15% of our community is a part of the fellowship program. So that's part of how we can say sustainable, right? Like how many, what percentage can we manage and still deliver on our promises? But what I found was, oh, our fellows are not having the measurable impact that we are aiming for
Right.
with their audiences. So I had to make the really hard decision of pausing the fellowship program.
Yes.
We're bringing it back in January, so that feels really exciting. But I'm sharing this because it would have been easy for me to say, well, it's fine. Right?
Mhm.
Like, let's just keep it going. It's fine as it is. But we were not living up to our mission, really, of impact. So we paused the fellowship program. Everyone was taken care of, and that felt really good. Then I just had to really actually get in there and evaluate what's missing here that we're not able to reach in a measurable way our goals of impact. So we are currently adding in more support, right? Because some often if someone is from a marginalized community, there are things going on in their world that's going to
Mhm.
require them to need more support in order to complete our program. More support and also just different accountability with our fellows so we can deliver on our promise. So
Mhm.
I feel like I was just talking for a long time, but the question was all about how do we do this work and stay sustainable?
Yeah.
Part of it is understanding the bandwidth that I can actually hold and do it right, and having things in place to measure our desired outcomes so that we can actually course correct and ensure that we are delivering on the intention.
Wow. That is just that is just so rare. Let me just say that. I'll start with the first sentence I told you when we logged on before I pressed record. Like what you're doing is so rare that it's not many people that you can put your finger on and say we want to make an impact and we want to be able to, have measurable outcomes where we can say this is where we started, this is where we are. And if something is not quite working how you had expected, can we just take a pause, deep dive in it, and see what needs to be done? And in fact, it was one of the questions that I had here that, in 2021, you launched the Social Impact Exchange program and I wanted you to share a little bit about it, which you have. One of the questions was, how has it been received? Because I was so curious to know the recipients,
Mhm.
how are they receiving it? How is it working for them? Um, because for me, that was more like a measure of, are you getting what you potentially were hoping to get out of providing this program? And you've answered that beautifully. Um, when it comes to what's been happening in the United States, Dallas, there's been just the pendulum, and you've been in business long enough to know that it swings It's a constant swinging of the pendulum. One minute we're right here, we are marching, Black Lives Matter, and then the next thing is DI is a bad word. We can't even talk
Right.
about it. There's cutbacks, it's been rolled back. It's yeah. How does one stay in the work, especially during times like this? Because I have to tell you, for me, business has really taken a different shape. It's taken a very different design in terms
Mm,
of the interest of people. 2020, it's like everybody's flocking in, couldn't like keep up with the demand. Tell me what to do, educate me, sign me up, where, put my name down. I'm on a wait list. I want your help. Come in, help my community. And then it just completely dies out to the point where you're like, come on, this couldn't just have been like a seasonal thing. But I've been in this work long enough to know the pendulum swings. One
mhm.
time we're here, the next time we're here, but it swings. And so, how are you staying in the work, especially over there in the United States, where it's almost like um, not allowed to do this work anymore or even talk about it because it's like there are repercussions to it.
I actually just feel sick to my stomach because it's a very, very chaotic time in the world, and I want to acknowledge that.
Mm,
For me, how do I'm being thoughtful because
mm,
I think it's more important now than ever to just put my money where my mouth is, right? And my mouth doesn't have to be wide open screaming, right? I can continue to do this work without hiding, but without being against. So this is where I have landed and I'm navigating it. And I might say this to you and then tomorrow
yeah.
go live on Instagram ranting against everybody. So,
Yeah.
but I saw a colleague of mine post on social media and it said something to the effect of if you're still silent, you are mega. If you're silent, you are mega. And I just thought to myself, just because you don't see me posting things doesn't mean I am not doing the work. And if I really believe in inclusion, I'm going to stand for what I'm for rather than what I'm against,
Yes.
right? And that doesn't mean being passive, but it means being vocal about the things and the people that I want to raise up, rather than, because it's easy. It's such a adrenaline rush. And there's
Mm,
so much to say
yeah.
about what I don't like about this administration,
Yeah.
right? It's actually harder to focus on and talk about the things I am for right now. That requires more work and intention because the stuff I'm against is everywhere,
Yes.
right? Um, so that as a guiding principle for me, like how do I want to show up right now? That is what I'm holding on to. I'm going to be louder about the things I'm for than
Yeah.
I am about the things I'm against. Except in my like group chat.
Yeah, for sure. We all need an outlet where we can just
Yeah. Yeah.
but in saying that, Dallas, and I so agree with everything that you're saying, isn't it easier when we're during these times as somebody who is genuinely doing the work, isn't it easier to, because it's a practice, it's something that you are doing.
Hmm.
It's not something where you're like that it's a light switch that's off and then now you turn it on so that people know. And this is what I try to get my students to understand is that once you start doing the work, and if you stay in the work and you're consistent in it, and staying in the work doesn't mean like being in programs, for the rest of your life, but there is a way that you're staying consistent in this
Yes.
work, that it touches you in a way whereby you're not going weeks on end without keeping up with
Mhm.
your value of inclusion. right?
Yes.
When times like this come, people don't have to ask the question, is Dallas an inclusive coach? What are
Mm,
Dallas's values when it comes to holding space for people who are marginalized? What programs does she have that might be a little bit accessible for people like us? What like it goes without saying because you're doing this work, you don't have to be necessarily louder, but the
yeah.
fact that you're in it, you are in it. And so you just continue going on with what you've been doing. And if
Yeah.
you've been preaching, you continue doing that. If you've been speaking up, you continue doing that because it's a lifelong thing, it's an ongoing thing. So those people who think that, oh, I did this work back in 2020 and I'm going to be silent and then wait for the other wave when we're now,
Mm,
this work is, because I believe like administrations come and go. What's going to
yeah.
happen when there's another administration that is now trying to amplify or fix what has been, um, broken, and I don't think it's broken. I think it's they're just doing what they've always known to do. So when somebody comes to course correct, where are you gonna be like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
get the business back, get your team trained, and like really, it's so
Yeah.
reactive to the current times instead of just being true to who you are and your values.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that you sharing that because in a lot of ways, in my corner of the world, things have not changed. We have not changed our practices, right? Because of the administration that is in place. Yeah.
Mm, mm. And so I would just like to know I know you've shared with me some examples, your social impact exchange program, how you model, this work, and especially through those steps you share with us in your inclusion statement. But I'd love to know what are some of the things you're doing in your business to be intentionally inclusive. And Dallas, it may not just be in your business, it may be personally, like what you're doing with your daughter, or what do you do to just stay plugged in? And the reason why I ask this question is I've had several clients say to me, Annie, when we're together in a container, I'm so switched on. But the moment that time is over and I go back to my white life,
Mhm.
just find it so hard to keep up. Like, I just go on with my life as normal, and I don't like that. How do I stay plugged in? And I have ways in which I support them to stay plugged in, but I'd love to know what are the things that you're doing to stay connected.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a few examples. An easy one is I make sure that the books I read are written by people who don't look like me. It's like I'm reading anyhow, right? So that's just an easy way to
Yeah.
keep my eyes open,
Mm, I love
right?
that. Yes.
So that's one. Another one is um, whenever I collaborate, whether you and I met because I invited you to participate in a bundle that I was
Yeah.
hosting, right? I'm so happy that happened. Um, and so, whether I am the host of a collaboration or a participant, a question I always ask when I'm invited is I want to know what effort the host is making to ensure that the panel that's coming together or the group of experts coming together represent diverse racial and ethnic and even gender backgrounds,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And if they don't quite know how to answer my question, then I will offer up my spot to another expert in my field who has a marginalized identity. So that's like an easy practice that I have in place. I've got my email script. It's just something I always do. And I always strive to ensure that the stages I am
yeah.
in charge of have a high representation of people who don't look like me, because there
Mm,
are a lot of ladies who look like me in the coaching industry. And that's an easy way that I can ensure that I'm walking my talk.
mm,
So those are it's kind of some simple, because I'm getting invited every week to some sort of collaboration. So that's an
mm,
easy practice to have in place to keep my eyes open and to signal what my values are and really practice that.
mm,
And my husband is half Korean. So my daughter is a quarter Korean and so invested in that part of her background. It's really, really cool and sweet. So it's fun to have conversations with her where she will notice
mm,
inclusion, right? Or the lack thereof, which is so interesting because it's not like the two of us ever have ever sat down and I don't think I've even ever said that word to her
mm,
necessarily, but she's very aware of her own surroundings,
mm.
and the people, like the people who she sees on a day-to-day basis. And we're big soccer fans. We love women's soccer.
Yes.
And we really love women's soccer. And Farina loves seeing when the starting lineup is more black and brown than it is white. And that kid notices that stuff. So to me, that's just another signal that, okay, we're living this. As a role model, whether it's to my clients or to my kid, I am living this enough that it's just become a part of the fabric of our lives. So that feels really rewarding for me.
Well, and it's so practical. Like I love how you kind of laid it out for us. And we sometimes as parents, we don't always realize what an impact certain things have on our kids, especially if they have mixed ethnicities or mixed race, or just how important representation is for children to see
Mhm.
themselves represented and giving them the permission to be, oh, you can be that, or you can do that. See, there are people in all different industries, and you're able to dream bigger when you see yourself represented. And so that's such a
Mhm.
great example, Dallas.
Thank you.
And how old is she?
She's 10 and a half.
Ooh, 10 and
Yeah.
a half. Bet you're going on 16, hey.
Yeah, in some ways, for sure. Other ways, she's still just a tiny one, right? And I see, like right before this interview, she came up and she said, "Can I sit in your lap?" And she's
Oh.
tall, so it's very awkward, right? But yes, of course, you can sit in my lap. So she's just kind of on the cusp of both of those
Mhm.
worlds.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old girl, and
Uh-huh.
she cannot wait to just grow up. She's just like, I can't wait. I can't wait. The teenage years are just knocking, and she's so ready for 13. She keeps talking about, my 13th, but I'm like, it's next year. Stop. Enjoy your 12th, okay? It'll come, and, just enjoy it while you can. So, yeah, it just feels like the years, they go by so quickly, but the days are long, but the years
Yeah.
they fly by.
It's so true, isn't it? It's true in business too. I've heard that
Mhm.
as a parent. I remember being pregnant and people saying that to me and not quite getting it until you're in it.
Yes.
But then I look at my business and the same is also true. The days can
Mhm.
be long, right? Or those gaps when you're building something but it's not quite ready yet. And then looking back, I can't believe I've been in business for 20 years. It's shocking to me.
20 years, that is a long time. And I also, Dallas, love how you're prepared with those email scripts.
Mm.
Somebody
Mm.
sends you that invitation to collaborate. When and I'm sure there's so much sometimes desire, like, oh, this would be such a great opportunity, but you're like, hang on, I gotta prioritize my values here and what I believe in. And just being that prepared that you have a script to go like, okay, respond back and even offer, maybe even offer or recommend somebody else. Because a lot of times these people don't know who, they're like,
Right.
oh, I'm not connected. I don't know. another person who I could have fill that spot who is a person of color. So, and you kind of cringe. You're like, oh, why don't you? You know,
Yes.
why aren't you
Yeah.
making the effort to? Because it's not that hard if you begin to do the work, you know.
Yeah.
And so you've shared those couple of examples. Is there anything else that comes to mind where you're like, "Ooh, Annie, this is a good one. Some of the things that I'm doing to be intentionally inclusive."
Yeah, I think another one, again, this is just a practice,
Mhm.
right? Is and I'm very proud of this. Inside of my business, I have created an infrastructure, and that sounds fancy. It doesn't have to be a big deal, everyone listening. It could just be an email that you cut and paste. But we have systems in place for me to receive feedback, right? Instead of just this, well, no one's complaining, so everything must be okay. I really
Mhm.
have systems in place for us to receive feedback. And a success metric that I pay attention to when I'm measuring our own impact in regards to inclusion is, am I getting complaints? Not because I don't want to, but because if I'm not, people don't feel safe or empowered enough, or trusting enough to give me that kind of feedback, knowing I can handle it and I'll do something about it.
Right. Oh, yeah. I feel like I'm having a conversation. I don't know. It just felt a little bit like deja vu there. I feel like I've had this
Mm,
conversation before, but it is so true. When we think that everything is just going all fine, no complaints, everything's cool, it may not necessarily be the case. And it is so brave to be in a position whereby I'm open to feedback. Let me know what we're doing right, but also let me know where we could be doing better or where we've kind of missed the mark. And I have to say, for me, when it comes to that point where I need to get feedback, it's always cringe because I poured
totally.
my heart into it and I'm like, oh, they're gonna pull this apart and tell me what I got wrong or how this didn't work for them. And it's always kind of cringe because
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to get defensive, but there's the me inside who's like, oh, come on, you don't know how long and how hard and how, but it takes a very special kind of human being to be brave enough to have that continual loop or that kind of infrastructure, as you've said,
Hmm.
where that feedback is open and is welcome.
Yeah.
People, so they can, so that people know that you care about them and that if there's
Yes.
anything that's not going right, then you're made aware of it.
Yeah. And that for me, even more important than that is, do they feel safe enough to tell us? Because they know it's not going to be ignored, right? And they also know that I am someone who can be trusted. And that's how I hope I show up, with my daughter, right? But also as a coach, is as someone who can really be trusted.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Now, I'd like us to just shift gears just very slightly and talk about the idea of fitting in,
Mm.
Dallas. I was reading about the time when you pierced your navel.
Oh no.
Yes. Yes, and it didn't heal properly. Hey.
Yep.
The idea of trying to fit in, doing something that kind of looked cool on another 18-year-old, and you're like, well, I'm 18 now and I'm adulting and I want to do things on my terms, and maybe doing that will make me feel like I am, independent and adulting. And then you quickly realize, nah, that's not for me. That's not for me. And I think 7 weeks later, you just checked it out. You're like, I'm done with
Yeah.
that. The idea of fitting in and how you say that you've come to learn that it keeps people stuck. How
Hmm.
have you, as an individual, managed, or rather, how do you try not to fit in? I'll kind of frame that in, and I don't know if it's it might make it more difficult for you to answer this question. For me as a Black woman, there's been so much fitting in I've had to do
Hmm.
because predominantly the spaces I occupy are white, whether they be virtual or in person. I'm normally the only Black person in the room. Whether it was my days in corporate, I was the only Black person in the office. And so the desire to fit in is so big because you already stand out physically. You just stand out all of the time. Your accent, the shape of your body, your skin color, your hair, like everything stands out. And so just the ability to be like everyone else feels like it's not amplifying the difference.
Yeah.
Um, how, talk to me about fitting in and how when we when we try to do that, how it keeps us stuck and how potentially somebody who identifies in this way could learn to, not necessarily try to fit in. And I know we keep being told that our differences are our superpowers, but being a minority, being
Yeah.
underrepresented, being underserved, this is not a superpower. It is, there's a lot of marginalization happening. And so I don't know if I framed that question well enough for you to dive in and answer, but yeah, what comes up for you when I share that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that based on what you shared, there are times where, as a Black woman, fitting in was a requirement for safety. Is that accurate?
For survival.
For survival. Yes, right, right. So I think that's a different conversation
Mhm.
than this conversation around understanding that your difference is your superpower, right? Like
Mhm.
I think those are two separate conversations. But, I have a client who she's a Black woman and just talks about how her name is Toya Gavin. Her Substack is incredible. It's called Woke Up Worthy. Her Substack is really, really incredible. But Toya talks about how we're all just pretty basic. And as a Black woman, maybe she doesn't need Black girl magic in order to be accepted. So she's pushing back kind of on some of these ideas. And I think that's what I also mean in a different way at my core when I talk about my desire to fit in. And I think it's like, where is our motivation coming from? Right? Am I taking action because I'm not relating to myself as whole? Or am I taking action for other reasons, right?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
want to be clear that there are circumstances where for survival, you're going to make a decision that aligns with survival, right? But if you're in an environment where it's not about your survival,
Mhm.
is your motivation um, is your motivation about I'm going to say it differently. How are you relating to yourself as whole versus as missing something, not enough, incomplete, not yet ready? Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm just thinking a lot about Toya because I mean her work is so rad. I should introduce the two of you. You would like her so
Please.
much. Yeah, she's so great, but she just really is good at articulating these important distinctions of
Mhm.
about where our own expectations, and no matter who you are, your own expectations of yourself are probably not aligned often with your own best interests. Right? If your motivation is one where you're relating to yourself as not yet whole.
That's powerful. I was not expecting that response. That is powerful. How you relate to yourself. Yes.
Yeah, so like my belly button piercing, that was totally me relating to myself as a dork. I was a dork. Karina was the cool kid. And so, oh, here's the answer, right? To
Yeah.
not feeling this otherness, right?
Mhm.
In such a superficial, silly 18-year-old way. But for me, it was real.
Yeah.
Um, And of course, it wasn't the solution.
Yeah. As we wind down this conversation, and Dallas, gosh, honestly, this I could keep talking to you. What do you think have been the benefits of doing this work of inclusion? Because we are part of an industry that is so monetized. It is just,
Mm.
look, six-figure business, seven-figure business, eight, nine, 10, you name it. Like the goal has been so much about making so much money. And of course, we need to make money. We're running businesses, but I feel like that has overshadowed anything else, especially when it comes to holding space. What would you say has been the benefit of doing this work of inclusion and staying in it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can be inclusive and still be rich. And I want inclusive people to be the richest people. So, for the
Yeah.
record, right? But for me, and this I think comes with being a mom, right? And just getting older. I'm almost 50. And I just realize now that money, it's kind of the easiest and most convenient way to measure outcomes, but it is just another form of energy. And as I get older, what matters more, I know how to make money. Do I know how to really make joy? Not always for myself, right? Do I know how to make time for myself? Working on it. So as I have grown, I realize that there are other currencies that actually matter as much or more to me than the money. And if I'm low on one of these currencies, it puts a cap on how much money I can actually earn. So the more I have embraced inclusion as a practice, the less attached I am to positioning my offers as money making offers because that's what sells.
Right.
And therefore, I'm selling more easily. And my clients are just like, talk about magical human beings. They're just good people to be around. And of course, they're also seeing results. So it's this interesting lesson I have learned about money is not the only form of energy.
Mm.
Right. And so if I can look at other types of energy that matter to me and prioritize those as much in my decisions, in my messaging, and all of those things, that a rising tide lifts all boats
Mm.
when it comes to that. And that's been really true for me over the last few years.
Oh, that is absolutely beautiful how you framed that. I want to end by asking the question that I ask all my guests, and that question is, if fear wasn't a factor, how do you think you'd show up more in your work?
Oof. If fear wasn't a factor, how would I show up more in my work? I would actually make slower decisions.
Mm.
I think I can tend to be someone who wants to like bypass the discomfort of
Yeah.
figuring things out. And so I'll just like make the fast decision and trust that this is good enough for now.
Mhm.
And when the next problem arises, we will address that when it comes. So in the work I have learned around inclusion has been so helpful around this. Because what is that? One of my mentors said to me once that efficiency is the enemy of inclusion.
Oh,
So if fear was not a factor, I would be better at slower decision making.
no. Efficiency is the enemy of inclusion. Well, I haven't heard that before.
Okay, yeah.
That is, I need to sit with that. Wow. You would make decisions. You'd take your time. You would slow
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
Hmm. Wow. Well, Dallas Travers, where can people race over and connect with you and find out about the hive and everything else that you're doing, which is absolutely incredible?
Sure. My website is dallastravers.com. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle is Dallas Travers.
Beautiful. We'll have that in the show notes. Dallas, thank you so much for being here and having this conversation with me. I'm so grateful.
You're welcome. I had a great time. Thank you again for the invitation.
We are represented. We are represented. We are represented.
Thank you so so much for tuning in. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a review so this podcast can reach more online business owners, and together we can begin to normalize racial inclusion in the online coaching space. I'd love to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where this podcast episode was recorded, the Wiradjuri people in central New South Wales, Australia. Music produced in Nairobi, Kenya by Patrick St. P. Mbaru and Kambua Mathu. Vocals by Joanne Matata.
Represented.